But let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of this podcast, and we're breaking down our first division of the 2025 NFL season. We figured we'd start with the home of the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the rest of their NFC East opponents. Let's start off with the Eagles. Obviously, They came in last year, Super Bowl champs, took down the Chiefs as kind of a retribution for 2 seasons prior. They kind of stopped a potential, major Chiefs dynasty if it doesn't already exist, right? Like they stopped a Chiefs three-peat right in their tracks. Jalen Hurts, while really, you look at his stats in the regular season and the playoffs, like his regular season over 15 games, by all metrics, good. Not really his best by any metric in his 4 years in the NFL. But then you go to the playoffs, and even taking out the Super Bowl MVP, I mean, this is his best postseason effort. I mean, he just really, really turned it up. So for you, what was kind of the driving force for this Eagles team last year? Was it Jalen Hurts? Was it somebody else? What allowed them to kind of turn it on in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl?
Am I allowed to say it's Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni? Because how they have built this roster and built this staff is just unbelievable to any team that we've ever seen. Jeff Lurie is obviously involved in that as well. But the roster construction on this team, top to bottom, and from a depth perspective, is so damn good. And they are going to be set for life until at least 2029. Like, this is a team that might be the first team to ever three-peat a Super Bowl, as long as they keep backfilling the way that they at least did this offseason, right? And those players continue to get better and better the way that we've seen over the past several years, i.e. Jalen Hurts, right? And look, I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts guy in terms of the player as a passer, but what he brings in as an athlete, as a quarterback, as a leader, and being the face of this franchise cannot be understated enough. He is, in terms of what he does for this team from, I don't want to say mojo, but I think that's the really only word I can use, but from a mojo and vibes perspective, I know that's not overly analytical, right? As I said, I want this to be, but what he does for them from that standpoint and how he opens up the offense with his legs, with his middle of the field passing, with how he controls the line of scrimmage is something that a lot of quarterbacks can take from and expand their games further. With that said, the supporting cast he has is absolutely bar none the best in the NFL. He's had the best offensive line consistently ranked by PFF over the past 3 years. They've been the number one offensive line. And they've had some turnover on the offensive line too, but they're still really damn good. This defense was one of the best in the NFL last year. And a lot of that was Vic Fangio. And not just him, but the guys buying in. Because Vic Fangio defenses don't work when you have a couple of rogue players that don't buy into the system. Because it's so heavily tailored to all 7 guys in the back end work together in coverage and letting the pass rush do its thing. And if you look at the Miami Dolphins, they had 2 or 3 personalities that thought they were better than the system, which might have been true. So they didn't buy into the system, and they got beat consistently. So people thought Vic Fangio was done as a DC. But he just showed that he is still a top 5 DC in this league with how he runs this defense and their match quarter system. And I think the emergence of Zach Bond moving from a stand-up edge to off-ball Mike linebacker and was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year cannot be overstated enough. Cooper DeJean was perfect as a slot corner. Quinion Mitchell was an island. He covered half of a field on his own. He was consistently the one going away from trips and playing that deep quarter and deep third and matching with some of the best receivers this game has to offer. The pass rush is incredible, top to bottom. Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt really emerged as really good defensive ends, especially after Brandon Graham went down with his injury. We'll get into some of the other pass rushers as I go along this, but the defense was great. Offensive line was awesome, as they always are. Receiving core is one of the best in the NFL, and obviously Saquon Barkley goes without saying, goes for over 2,000 yards, has the best year of his career, and of course, he goes from a bottom 10 offensive line his entire time when he was with the Giants to the number one offensive line. That was such a home run value to bring him into Philly. So I think the whole culmination of the team, how this roster is built, how the offensive defense was ran, has really been awesome just to see how all of it has come together, and you blew out a team looking for a three-peat. And we'll get into the Chiefs. That'll be the last episode. Will be the AFC West. So we'll get into the Chiefs when we get there. That was the worst Chiefs team we're ever going to see. And they still made it to the Super Bowl. And if not for a Pat Mahomes pick, probably could have been competitive in that game, at least until halftime. But once he threw that pick and Coop took it for 6, their whole offensive game plan was thrown out the window. And you had to have Pat Mahomes do something and or just elevate the offense more than what it was able to do. And just with Matt Nagy running that offense and just no star power anywhere on that team, offensively at least, you can't do much against that defense. So to make a long story short, we're going to talk about Jalen Hurts more in depth. I have a lot of analytics on him that I went in deep dove. It took me about 10 hours to put everything together. But you know, there's a lot of debate. Is he top 5? Is he top 10? And that's kind of ran football discourse. Is he better than Cam Newton? Which they're two completely different players. Sorry. Just because someone's a dual threat quarterback that can run people over doesn't mean they're the same exact friggin' player. Yeah. So we're going to get into that. But the first thing I want to go into is roster turnover. And I think, especially defensively, the turnover this Eagles team is going to have, it's going to be a tall bill to order. And if this first preseason game was any indication of how this defense is going to play, or at least who is projected to start is going to play, they're going to have some rough patches in the beginning of the season. So first off, CJ Gardner-Johnson, 907 snaps. He's gone. He's in Houston, battling an injury, but should be good to play. Mekhi Becton, who broke out as a guard last year, 903 snaps. That's a lot to try and replace. Darius Slay, 698 snaps. Keely Ringo is supposed to be the guy taking over, but he hasn't done it. He hasn't played well his entire career in the limited time he has, and he got absolutely – it's not that Jamar Chase was barely beating him. Jamar Chase was torching him and made him look like a college freshman. Like that level of bad, Keely Ringo. So Darius Slay losing him is going to be a huge bill to try and replace. Maybe Keely can figure it out, but we'll see. Josh Sweat goes to the Cardinals, 622 snaps lost there. So lose one of your big edge guys. Milton Williams, who turned it on last year, 500 snaps. He's in New England. We'll talk about how they're going to replace that later on with my dark horse candidate. Isaiah Rodgers, nickel hybrid corner, 329 snaps. A third of the season. You have to replace that somehow. Brandon Graham retired, 311 snaps. He was on pace for 480 before his injury, so I think that's significant. Kenneth Gainwell, their spellback, 300 snaps lost. It looks like Will Shipley is going to pick up that role. A.J. Dillon is just going to be the downhill guy when they need a yard and they don't want to tush push. And then Oren Burks, I wanted to talk about him. Only 147 snaps in the regular season, but after Nakobe Dean went down, he came in and played 230 snaps in 4 games. That's a big deal, and he was pretty damn good in those 4 games. So a lot of guys they lost, good amount of depth as well. So how are they going to replace that? What are they going to do to make that happen? They brought in some guys via the draft, via free agency. It's kind of fit the bill. I think this Eagles defense is not going to be as good as it was last year, especially in the first half of the season, but kind of like how the Ravens turned it around in the back half of the year last year. You know, first half of the year, they were one of the worst defenses. Second half of the year was one of the best. I think we're going to see something similar to that for the Eagles as we roll into 2025.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed when you brought that list of kind of subtractions, right, in front of me, I noticed how heavy it was on the defensive side than it was on the offensive side. And, you know, looking at it, out of the 2 offensive players that were listed, Mekhi Becton and Kenneth Gainwell, you know, you talked about in the beginning how great this offensive line was for Philly. Obviously, you need a great offensive line to run a play like the tush push, which, you know, is still remains controversial in this league. I, you know, not to get off on another side tangent, but I personally does not bother me. I just think if you don't like it so much, run
Stop it.
Yeah, or stop it. If you think it's so dumb and petty and cheap, run it yourself. I don't understand why more teams just don't want to do it. But you have a great offensive line, and you only lose Mekhi Becton. I say only, but I mean Mekhi Becton is a fantastic guard. Mm-hmm. But in terms of that overall unit, how important is keeping that through training camp, through going into this season, been for this Eagles roster, and how important will it be down the stretch?
It's going to be really important, right? Like, they have a couple of guys they're looking to backfill. Tyler Steen's going to be competing for that right guard spot. But even the turnover itself, right? Like, Cam Jurgens, decent center. Obviously not Jason Kelce level. He's one of the best of all time at the position. Yep. But kind of coming in and having Landon Dickerson next to him and Mekhi Becton transition from tackle to guard showed that, hey, I can work with someone who's new to the position, or at least new to me on my right side, and I can make it work. And I have this absolute anchor in Landon Dickerson on my left side. Like, it cuts out half the work from him having someone like Landon, who is one of the best guards in the league. He's just a road grader, especially in the run game. Like, when they run tush push, more often than not, Jalen Hurts is going to the left because of Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata, 700 pounds of mass just plowing through the left side of the defense. And a lot of that takes pressure off Cam Jurgens' plate. So I think left side is really good. Obviously, they're going to need a replacement for Lane Johnson within a year or two, because I don't know how much longer he's going to play, but he's still one of the best offensive tackles in the league. So even if Steen is in there, Jurgens' play is going to elevate because now he's got a full year under his belt. Now he's going to be able to show Tyler Steen, hey, this is how our offense runs. This is how we work together and operate. So those two can work together. And having a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame right tackle next to you is really going to help Tyler Steen. So I think a lot of people are worried about how he's going to do filling in for Mekhi Becton. I think he is in the perfect situation for someone replacing a starter. I don't think it's going to be that big of a competition. I believe Trevor Keegan is behind him, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that. But I don't think Trevor is going to really push him to take reps away. But if he does, Keegan is a hell of a run blocker himself. And this team, they have one of the heaviest run pass splits in the league, or one of the most balanced run pass splits in the league. They run more than anyone else on a percentage standpoint. So I think if he does win the job over Tyler Steen, it's going to be a similar situation. Jurgens is going to help him out. Lane Johnson's going to help him out. And they're just going to run the shit out of this football like they did last year. So, and I think moving forward, as long as they find a good replacement for Lane Johnson, this offensive line is not going to miss a beat, especially if Cam Jurgens does take that next step and they figure out who the long-term answer is at right guard. Because if you have that answer, whoever's replacing Lane Johnson, their job just became a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the name that really stuck out to me that the Eagles are losing. I mean, they released him, obviously, in March, and then he signed with the Steelers the next day on a one-year, $10 million contract, that being Darius Slay.
Yeah.
Obviously, what about that move? What about Darius Slay do you think caused the Eagles front office to just let him go? And then what could they potentially lose with him moving to the Steelers? If anything, maybe they feel like they're fine.
I think this is more so. I don't think it's addition by subtraction, but I think they're getting ahead of the curve and want to get younger faster. They know that this defense, with as much turnover as it's going through, at least in the front six, front seven, they run a ton of nickel. So really, it's the front six. They run the lightest boxes in the NFL. I think they ran 63%, and the next closest was 52% in terms of light box versus heavy box. I think this is just ripping the Band-Aid off, right? Like, Darius Slay is getting older. He started to trail off towards the end of last season. You have Quinyon Mitchell, who's really solid. You obviously have Cooper DeJean, who's going to play more exclusively in the slot for the most part. But if you get caught in a pickle, you could move him outside if you wanted to. I think this is just a move they're getting ahead of now, so this way they don't have to worry about it later. They can bring in someone cheap and save themselves cap room later on when their cap is going to explode in 2029. So I think they just want to kind of put a patch on it, whether it's Keely Ringo. I believe Dory Jackson just got signed as well. Not just signed, but he's with the team. I might be wrong on Adoree, but I know there's a Jackson on that team in the secondary. But either way, whoever is taking over that cornerback 2 spot, I don't think is going to be the long-term answer unless they're great out of the window, right? Like, if they are serviceable enough to not be a weak spot in the secondary or at least be heavily targeted, and they force teams to throw to Quignon and Cooper DeJean more, they'll be happy with whoever's in that spot. But if they get picked on a ton, that's going to be a huge loss that we're going to see, because teams last year, they were like, all right, do I throw to Quignon Mitchell, who's one of the best zone match corners in the league out of the gate because that's what he excelled in college, or do I throw to Darius Slay, who's one of the most savvy veteran corners in the league, and if I just miss my throw, he's picking it off or batting it to the ground, who are you going to pick? Now, this year it's, okay, I'm obviously avoiding Quignon Mitchell. I have to see where Cooper DeJean is, and if they're on opposite sides of the field, I need to hit a tight window. But if I force them to the same side and I force an ISO one-on-one against your quarterback 2, you better hope that my quarterback throws a bad pass, because other than that, you're going to have no chance of stopping it. And that's what the Bengals did against Keely Ringo. Granted, wasn't the full starting defense. It's still the fact remains that the most glaring issue on this team is cornerback 2. And they have to figure something. They have to figure out a way to complement that and figure out how they're going to mask that as best as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I know we kind of alluded to it, but I do want to get into the Jalen Hurts discussion. I know that you said Jalen Hurts this season, particularly his playoff performance, kind of caused you to rethink your top 10 quarterback discussion. And now the moment of truth. After a whole summer of thinking and pondering and watching tape, where does Jalen Hurts sit amongst the league's quarterbacks for you?
I still think he's outside the top 10. And that's including let me preface it with this. I did a full breakdown of the past 3 years of passing, from basic metrics to advanced metrics and watching tape. This was like my big summer project that I had in terms of doing my research. And the biggest thing for me was I wanted to look at quarterbacks who have played all 3 of the last season. So, and they had at least 600 dropbacks, or 650, I think was the metric or the number I used. And the reason being is that football is so cumulative and sample size based that you can't, in my opinion, and other people disagree with me, but in my opinion, if a quarterback is 2 to 3 years in their career, you cannot be putting them in top 10 conversations at the position, especially a quarterback. You could arguably do it for other positions. Like Brock Bowers, obviously is already a top 10 tight end, and no one's going to argue that. Quignon Mitchell, I think, is already a top 10 corner. You can't argue that, because how the system works for those defenses, or at least for Brock Bowers as a position player on offense, the scheme isn't going to change as much as it does on offense. And you can't attack offenses. You can attack offenses more defensively than offenses can attack defenses and find weak points faster, at least in my opinion, right? So when we look at Jalen Hurts as a quarterback, as a passer, again, this is leaving rushing aside. This is just passing, right? He is one of those quarterbacks who over the past 3 years has given us a really good sample size. And I looked at just the regular season, because while postseason success matters, postseason success is, quarterbacks do not drive teams to the playoffs. And if that was the case, or if quarterbacks winning Super Bowls was the end-all be-all of GOAT talk to the top 5 list, then you would have to say Eli Manning is better than Tom Brady. Because in the 2 matchups they had against each other, Eli Manning beat him twice. So with that thought process and that logic, Eli is better than Tom Brady. And people want to look at, well, Jalen Hurts has outdueled Mahomes both times they've been in the Super Bowl. Great, that's 2 games. They have a 60 to 80 game sample size that you can look at, and you're going to look at 2 games just because they're the Super Bowl. Like, this goes beyond quarterback ranking. Like, ring talk, Super Bowl talk, championship talk has completely saturated how we evaluate individual players within the systems they're in. And that's why I wanted to bring up this conversation, is that while I think Jalen Hurts is a good player, and I like him as a person and as a player, I still don't think he's top 10 because of a few key areas that he has continuously struggled in over the past 3 years. So out of the 20 quarterbacks that are on this list, obviously you have the top 4. You have Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, and Josh Allen on that list. You also have a lot of guys who some would consider to be top 10, maybe top 5. Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy is up in these conversations now. Kyler Murray kind of floating around. Jared Goff is in those conversations. Like, a lot of those quarterbacks are on this list because they've played those past 3 years. We're not going to touch on Jaden Daniels, not going to touch on CJ Stroud, not going to touch on Jordan Love just because he didn't have the snap sample size to match this list. I think in 2022, he only threw the ball like 20-something times, so he's not even going to be eligible for this to begin with. Geno Smith is someone else entering top 10 conversation. So you're going to see a lot of those names on this list in terms of how we break down quarterback play. And the biggest thing I wanted to look at is how quarterbacks do against pressure versus no pressure, right? Because Jalen Hurts, having one of the best offensive lines, is not going to be pressured as much as some of these other quarterbacks. And if he is pressured, the blame's going to be more on him holding the ball too long rather than the offensive line giving up protection. And I think this just goes as a conversation in general, how we talk about, who's at fault for a quarterback getting sacked or pressured, right? Is it offensive line or is it quarterback? It's more so quarterback than it is offensive line. And it's usually with how they move in the pocket, how long they hold the ball, and how quick their trigger is. If they see something open, are they throwing it right away, or are they continuing their progression to find something else? And based on the numbers I've looked at in the film I watched, Jalen Hurts is a completely different quarterback under pressure than he is when he has a clean pocket. When he's under pressure, the majority of the time, not majority of the time, but the highest percentage of pressure fault over the past 3 years has lied with Jalen Hurts. Over 21% of his pressures were resulted because he held the ball too long or he drifted into pressure when one of his linemen had good pass protection. And I think the next closest was at like 17%, and that was Justin Herbert, which I completely rethought my entire viewpoint on Justin Herbert. So who I always thought was the number 5 quarterback the past 3 years. That's no longer the case since I've done this data. So this is not me picking on Jalen Hurts. This is my whole thinking of the quarterback position warped, because not the entire how I think of it, but like how I rank them has changed because of this. So just to throw some numbers at you, for the listeners at home and people that are watching, I'll try to keep this as simple and as digestible as possible. So if we look at dropback rate when someone was pressured, Jalen Hurts was 6th most often pressured when he was dropping back and getting pressured. That was at 36.61%. The quarterback just below him was Lamar Jackson at 36.31. The one right above was Brock Purdy, 37.04. Okay. Now we want to look at something called adjusted completion percentage against pressure. And this takes away drops, throwaways, quarterbacks that get hit when they release the ball, and if they're batted at the line of scrimmage. So it takes away any non-quarterback poor throws or good throws, right? If we look at adjusted completion rate, Jalen Hurts is 8th with 62.34%, which is pretty damn good in terms of adjusted completion rate. Pat Mahomes is right above him. Baker Mayfield is right below him. So good adjusted completion rate. When we look at yards per attempt against pressure, this is where I kind of go, because if we're looking at yards as the end-all be-all production, you have to look at it against pressure. And Jalen Hurts is 5th worst out of these 20 quarterbacks at 5.89 yards per attempt against pressure. Just above him is Justin Fields, 5.92. Just below him is Matt Stafford. So you're looking at Justin Fields, who most people would not consider top 20, and then you have Matt Stafford, who some people would consider top 5. He's right around that area. So you have that there. But I think that's the first alarming number I saw when I was looking at this. And I was like, okay, not great. Then we want to look at touchdowns against pressure. Okay. Jalen Hurts, his touchdown percentage against pressure was 12th out of these 20 quarterbacks. So just below the mid mark. And I want to say he was 4.43%. So just below him was Baker Mayfield, just above Pat Mahomes. So again, 2 good quarterbacks included in that conversation when they're pressured versus that. Next thing I want to go over is quarterback rating when pressured. And this is kind of the driving point home is the difference from when he's pressured versus when he's not pressured. Okay. So if we look at QBR, because that's a lot of people look at that, that's the end all be all stat and their difference when they're pressured versus not. Okay. Jalen Hurts, when he is pressured over the past couple of years, his quarterback rating drops 24 points. That's a huge decline. We're looking at one of the best quarterbacks when he's not pressured. When he is pressured, he's one of the worst. His pressure QBR, or at least when he's pressured, drops all the way down. Let me get this number here to 80.5. That's not getting it done in the NFL. If that was his QBR when he was pressured or not pressured, he wouldn't be in the league. That's his QBR when he is pressured. And guys that are around him, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, like these are quarterbacks who are not that good, right? And they struggle when they are pressured. Now, what works for Jalen is that most of the time, when it's not his fault, he's not getting pressured, right? If you take away the ones that are his fault, he's getting pressured less than 20% of the time, right? So, and there's a lot more to this spreadsheet, and I want to try to condense this as much as possible. But when you look at those main advanced metrics over this 3-year window of how quarterbacks do versus pressure versus not, Jalen Hurts doesn't step up to the challenge, and he doesn't step up to the plate in ways that other quarterbacks who are more consistently pressured do. Like Brock Purdy has the highest yards per attempt when he's pressured, and he's pressured more often than Jalen Hurts. So like just from a per throw basis, he's outperforming Jalen Hurts, and he's pressured more often. And a lot of people point out, oh, well, he had George Kittle, he had Debo, he had Brandon Ayuk. He has a good defense. His offensive line sucks outside of Trent Williams. And this past year, Dominic Pooney, who was a rookie. So just like I said earlier, small sample size, we can't say if he's really good yet or not. He had a good rookie year. There are quarterbacks who everyone laughs at that are better in these situations, and they're in these situations more often, right? So I don't think we can look at, like if we look at macro stats, Jalen Hurts isn't even top 10 in yardage over the past couple of years as a passer, right? Like let me pull up that number. If we look at total yards passing over the past, 3 years I had? Oh, where is my yards? I know I have it on here somewhere. Give me 1 second. If you look at the 3-year total based on yards, come on, where do I have it? I know I have it somewhere. Forget it. Either way. But he's not top 10 in yards over the past 3 years out of the same group of quarterbacks. So if he can't even do the basic stat to a high level, right? I know stats aren't everything, and I'm the first one to say that. But he's not productive from a stat standpoint. And when you look analytically, he's struggling in the places where if he was in any other position, he would be struggling as well. It's hard for me to say he's a top 10 quarterback. Is he a top 10 talent? I will say he's a top 10 talent. Between the speed, between how he layers his throws, he has a better arm than people think because they look at that one throw in the Chiefs game when he stepped on someone and the ball fell 20 yards short of the target. Everyone's like, oh, he doesn't have a strong arm. If you look at that go-ahead touchdown to put the game away in the fourth quarter when he hits Devontae Smith over the middle of the field on that deep seam or deep post, like he throws that 40 yards with ease off his back foot. Like he is a good quarterback. That's my main takeaway from this. Do I think he's top 10? No. And with that being said, Justin Herbert, I don't think is top 10 anymore either, just based on the data I found, because he struggles even worse against pressure. Now, he's asked to do a lot more in terms of the offense he plays in because Jalen Hurts is in shotgun 99.9% of the snaps outside of the tush pushes, right? So his eyes are constantly on the defense. He's not turning his back to the defense when he's running play action. He is not being asked to go under center nearly as often as Justin Herbert has in his career. And this is a quarterback who's exclusively shotgun his entire college career. So when you put all that together and you look at the 20 quarterbacks that we have on this list, like Kyler Murray, I wouldn't even consider top 15 on this list. Like, and I love Kyler. Talent-wise, I think he's top 5. But in terms of what we've seen from him and what he's done with it, he's not even top 15 for me. Who I would put at number 5 if we want to do top 5, right? Mahomes number 1, Lamar number 2, Josh Allen 3, Joe Burrow 4. I think everyone in that order agrees that's the top 4. If we want to see who the 5th best quarterback in the NFL is, And I know his pressure number, his yards per attempt pressure number wasn't great, but Matt Stafford is fantastic against pressure outside of that yards per attempt number.
Wow.
And I think Matt Stafford's been great, and he's been great for a long time. And he's dealt with injuries, which has kind of peeled back the layer of his quarterback play a little bit, but he's still firing on all cylinders. And if he can get over this back injury he's going through in camp, and we'll get into that during the Rams episode, but he is awesome. Against pressure, not against pressure. He carried that team to Super Bowl in 2021. Granted, that defense was really good, but he, especially in the second half, really turned it on and carried that team. That's a quarterback I would not want to start a franchise with, but if I had to put someone in the worst situation possible, I'm considering Matt Stafford before I'm ever even thinking about Jalen Hurts in that conversation. And I think that's kind of what it comes to. If you put all the quarterbacks on a level playing field, who are my top 10 guys? Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, you're not touching that list. Guys like Matt Stafford, Jared Goff, Geno Smith, those are guys I'm putting up above those guys in conversation.
Yeah. Wow.
So that long, convoluted way to say, I don't think he's top 10 overall. I think he's a top 10 talent, but not as a quarterback in today's NFL.
Yeah. If we can get a number, ballpark.
Yes.
Top 15?
Yes. I would say 11 or 12 for sure.
Got it.
Like I would definitely say he's about to break in, but the year when he had the least amount of help, which was 2023, when he had a horrible OC, the defense sucked, and he didn't have his weapons weren't being utilized the way they were this past season. That was his worst season in the NFL outside of his rookie year when he only played 5 or 6 games, right? Or at least started 5 or 6 games. So if you want to look at any year, look at 2023. That's who Jalen Hurts is as a quarterback. And is anyone going to take 2023 Jalen Hurts? No. To start a franchise, no one's going to take that, except Eagles fans who probably clicked off this, video by now or audio by now, right? Like they already stopped listening. But most people would not take 2023 Jalen Hurts. So why 1 year later, when he had a much better supporting cast and an NFL offense that was functional, why is he all of a sudden now in top 5? That's just where I'm at. And I think it's recency bias, ring culture, not looking at the nitty-gritty stats like this and deep diving into what the story is of that offense. And even if you take the rushing numbers, right? He has 42 rushing touchdowns over the past 3 years. How many do you think are non-tush-push rushing touchdowns?
Out of 23?
Out of 42 touchdowns.
Out of 43 touchdowns?
Yeah.
32.
He had 15 non-tush-push touchdowns. Out of the 42. That's just 40% of his rushing touchdowns were not tush-push. Like, wow. That's the biggest thing when people are like, oh, he's a great rusher. Yeah, he is, but that's not why they're scoring. Like, so that's all I can say to that. I know we have a lot more teams to get through. That's going to be the bulk of this episode. And we can kind of sprint through the rest of this, but that was like the big point I wanted to bring up today was Jalen Hurts top 10. I don't think so. So people can stop listening if they want, but that's just my take.
But a quarterback outside the top 10, still enough to make the Eagles a Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah. So I don't think Kyler Murray's top 15. I still think he's a good quarterback. But after about the top 20, the talent dips off. And again, this is taking out Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, those types of QBs who have done good things. There's just not a big sample size yet.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I wanted to move into a player that you listed as a dark horse potential for the Eagles this year, and that is defensive tackle Moro Ojomo.
Yes.
What about this guy do you feel like could get the Eagles? I mean, I guess it's kind of weird to get them to the next level, but because they've already won the Super Bowl, but continue that championship pedigree. Even after, again, we talked about a lot of their losses are focused on the defensive side of the ball. So how does that balance? How does Ojomo balance those losses out?
Absolutely. And I think it's his pass rush. I think this is one of the most underrated and under-talked pass rushers in the NFL, especially as a defensive lineman. So I broke down his numbers from week 13 into the Super Bowl because that's when he really came alive. And I think taking the postseason stretch into account is massive because he went against some really good offensive lines. The Rams' interior offensive line, the Commanders' offensive line was actually sneaky good last year. The Buccaneers' offensive line is decent, and the Chiefs have the best interior unit in the league. And I just wanted to talk about his numbers from week 13 and going up until the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl, right? So out of 42 defensive tackles with 125 pass rush snaps, he was third in total pressure rate, first in total pressure rate against true pass sets, so not play action, not RPO, not screens, true drop back passes. He was first in total pressure rate, which was nearly 25%. He was second amongst defensive tackles in pass rush win rate, and first in pass rush win rate against true pass sets, which was over 30%. So 3 out of 10 snaps, he's beating his guy in true pass rush. That's elite. Like, that's astronomical and absolutely absurd for a backup to do that. Then there's a metric called pass rush production by PFF. It heavily skewed towards sacks, and Moro Jomo did not have a lot of sacks. But even if we take this number, he was third amongst defensive tackles with an 8.4, and he was seventh in true pass rush situations in pass rush production with 12.2. Anything over 10, you're looking at really good territory. And so to have 12.2 as a DT in true pass rush situations is awesome. So really good. A couple of the numbers I wanted to highlight over the course of the entire regular season. He was 11th in pressure rate and pressure rate against true pass sets over the course of the entire year. And he was second in pass rush win rate and third in pass rush win rate against true pass sets. So even if you take the full course of the year when he wasn't that good in the beginning of the year, we're still looking at a top 10 DT in terms of pressure rate and pass rush win rate, which is a much better storyteller of how good you are at pass rush rather than looking at sacks. Because, and we'll get into this in the Rams episode, but Jared Verse had half the sacks Braden Fisk has. Who is the better pass rusher? Jared Verse. He's the reason why Braden Fisk got so many one-on-ones and easy matchups. We'll get into that in the Rams episode or the NFC West episode. But like as we see here, he was better than Milton Williams in a lot of these categories. So they're not going to feel the loss of Milton as a pass rusher as much. Now, there are areas in the run defense he has to get better at, but that's why they have Jordan Davis, who is a damn good run defender in the NFL. His pass rush isn't great, but he's a damn good run defender. And I think that's going to keep pressure off of Morrow when he comes in for his, 400 to 500 snaps this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think they'll really feel the loss of Milton. I think Morrow is more than ready and capable to take on those pass rush snaps and be a rotational DT in the rundowns.
And so for the Eagles, I feel like, 10 years ago, the question of, what does this team need to do to repeat? It was kind of a formality because we never really saw it too much. I mean, we've seen it up, in 2015, I would say we saw it once in our lifetimes when the Patriots went back to back, but it was really kind of seen as a fluke. But the Eagles stopped a potential three-peat.
Yes.
So I feel like it's not as ridiculous of a question as it was a long time ago. So I'm going to ask it now. What do the Eagles need to do to repeat as Super Bowl champions?
The offense needs to take the next step, and Jalen Hurts needs to show that I'm wrong. He needs to prove me wrong and prove himself right first and foremost. Like, he needs to show, well, I've shown flashes of good passing. Now I need to attack all levels of the football. I need to be more decisive with my throws. I need to anticipate throws better and not drift into pressure. If he can do 2 of those 4 things I mentioned, this offense is going to elevate, because guess what? Teams are going to hunker down against the run even more than last year. So Jalen Hurts is going to have to show off with his arm what he can do. And I think he can do it. He just hasn't done it to the level that people are talking about as a top 5, top 10 quarterback. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. He needs to do it this year. And if he does that and elevates his offense, 1, I will gladly put him in top 5, top 10 conversations. And number 2, this team will win a Super Bowl again, as long as the defense holds up its end of the deal like it did last year. If this is a top half of the league defense, there's no reason why they can't go to the Super Bowl again, even with all the pieces they lost defensively. Because guess what? They have guys waiting in the wings to show off. Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith is going to be one of the best edge combos for the next 2 to 3 years if they take the steps that they did throughout the playoff run. This pass rush interior is not going to lose any juice because of Moro Jomo, like I just said. Zach Bond is going to be awesome again as a linebacker. And whether it's Jihad Campbell or Nakobe Dean next to him or a mix, they're going to be fine. And the secondary, as long as cornerback 2 does not diminish the play of this defense is going to be top 10 again going into 2025.